Welcome to a new Lead with Confidence podcast. I'm your host, JP Warren. And on this podcast, we dive into certain skills, life stories, experiences, all to help people kind of navigate their way as they build their business or lead teams. Not only do we offer some, real world skill sets and kind of tips and trades on how to navigate and build your confidence. But we also meet with industry leaders out there building their own path as well. And actually, I want to bring on right now our guest today, Tony. Tony, I'm going to dive. I want to pick up where kind of we what we started talking about before we started recording. But let's kind of give a little background on kind of who you are, who Tony is, and what you're doing right now. And then let's just start having a conversation about kind of your experiences, because you've been you've been in the space for 20 plus years, and now you're actually getting out there building something new and kind of connecting the dots when a lot of people aren't. And that's what I'm excited about right now. So Tony, welcome to the Lead with Confidence podcast. This is the second one since we changed the title from Lead with Soft Skills, Lead with Confidence. Why don't you kind of give us a little kind of a little update, a little background kind of who you are and what you're doing right now. And then we'll just kind of start kind of talking about what the interesting topics we were talking about before.
All right. Well, thank you, JP. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've started working on drilling rigs and worked through the ranks, went back and got an MBA, traveled all over the world before and after the MBA, and I've spent the last 15 years in private equity-backed companies. Before that, I was with drilling contractors, rig manufacturers, and ExxonMobil as a major. So I've done a little bit of everything and a lot of nothing, management, leading, but all over the map, figuratively and literally. And about 18 months ago, I started a company helping people buy and sell companies. And I've got 2 deals in the pipeline right now. And I started posting online about a year ago, and I figured it out, really got going about 4 months ago, and became to the top 1% of the people on LinkedIn who write about oil and gas, mergers and acquisitions. So I'm happy to talk about anything in there. I think it's a big change of how people are building a brand, a personal brand, and how they're representing themselves in their companies.
I love it. So, hey, listen, before we kind of get into that, so I think that's going to probably take up a majority of the podcast, but you said you spent about 15 years in the private equity space right now. And private equity has been a big driver in the oil and gas. I think a lot of different industries as well, but I can only kind of speak to oil and gas state. And I've noticed the relationship between private equity and operations or service companies kind of change over I've seen the last 7 years, but you probably see more. What have you seen kind of the major differences between 15 years ago private equity and 2025 private equity? And how is that kind of a change? And I guess whether it's how they fund projects or maybe how people tell their stories to get funding for their projects, what do you see as kind of the major changes in the private equity space in your world?
15 years ago, the ESG movement didn't exist.
Right.
So that's one of the big changes is the factors they ask about, because at the beginning it was pretty much, are we going to make money? How big's the market? Where is it going? And the world was a very different place competitively for the oil and gas service sector then.
Right.
OPEC, the OPEC and shale kind of had their thing going for a while for the rivalry competitiveness. And now it feels different with the ESG movement, the competitiveness from wind, solar, batteries, different sources of energy that have really taken off.
Yeah.
And interest rates have gone up. So it's a lot of PE firms use a lot of leverage, sometimes as much as 80% debt on a company. And that's a lot more expensive now than it was when rates were a quarter of what they are today. So I think that has changed a lot of their game and strategy. They've also tried to turn companies faster. Okay.
All right. So when companies are turned faster, what's the potential implications of that, good or bad?
There's if you think about tripling your size of your company, wherever you're at today, let's say you're a $20 million revenue company and you're doing really well and you have good margins and you make $4 million EBITDA. So 20% margin. And in 3 years, you need to become 60 million revenue and 12 million EBITDA. That's a lot of growth.
That's a lot of growth in this market. Yeah.
And what I've found is I'm often hired to help go through that transition. And it happens, there's a joke I use, the dog that catches a car. What does the dog do when it catches a car? So if I'm running a company and let's say I build drilling rigs,
Yeah.
and I build 4 a year to get to my 20 million. And that's my part of it is and all of a sudden I get, instead of 4 a year, I get 12 a year. Everything about how I do it changes. The scale has to change. Everything tripled.
Okay.
And that's a lot of what I've found is the founders have developed a system that works well for them. And a lot of their key staff run processes in their head and they're not documented. They have processes, they have policies. At one company, they built rigs using a job shop mentality. You'd start building a skid in one place and different people would come to that place,
Okay.
their component. They do the welding, then you'd come install some equipment with a mechanic, and then the electricians would come, and then you'd put the roof on, and it kind of happened progressively. Maybe piping later. But what happened is they can't triple their pace by moving people to the equipment. So they set up like an assembly line and it becomes work cells and
Okay.
they kit it out. So there's the welding leads on a swing arm and they've got things set up to make the work faster. And then you need process engineers, you need different thinking and planning to do your work. You kit out parts and send them to the work cells. So but that lets you build 3 times the volume at the same or lower man hours. But you couldn't do that the other way. The system collapses. It's not big enough. It's not designed.
Okay.
So and that's hard for a lot of founders that have run the company that may have taken 20 or 30 years to get to that point. So then
So when you say it's hard for founders to kind of take on that 3X mentality, the 3X systems, the 3X. This is how we have to operate if we do want to grow. Is the mind shift? What is it?
I think a lot of the founders almost everyone I've met is bright enough to get the understanding of that.
Okay.
But they have 20 years of a habit of doing it this way with these people.
Yep.
And sometimes they've probably made good money on this point. And then someone gave them a big check because if that company was valued at 5 times earnings, which would be a nice number today, they got $20 million check. And maybe he left 20% of the company. So he got a $16 million check. So let's say he took home 2 or 3 million a year for the last 5 years, and then he got a $16 million check. Do you think he wants to come in and say, I'm going to take a clean sheet of paper and reinvent everything I do and start over and work the 70 hours a week?
No.
And so he hires someone else who was like me 10 years ago to come in with the energy and harness my energy to help them turn the company around. And they stay involved, but in a different role. And private equity, some of the private equity firms I've worked with only buy companies that can do lean manufacturing. Some do all service-based instead of manufacturing-based because they're comfortable with the project risk. They have investors that like that sort of thing. And they bring in tools and resources to help make that change.
Okay.
And they help evaluate the people and they bring in consultants that'll help train and move the people up. At one company, we had a guy that built the mast for a land rig and he ran the shop that did that. And when you triple, now we need 3 shops because we're doing 3 times the work. And I have 2 choices with that individual. He can figure out how to run 3 people running 3 shops and he moves up, he gets a promotion.
Yeah.
But if that guy is not open-minded and he's closed-minded, we leave him running his shop that he did a good job. We may give him some more tools, a few more processes, but he's going to keep running that shop. Same salary, same everything. But he'll feel demoted because between him and his current boss, there's now a guy running 2 more shops and he has 2 people doing the same work. So he stood still, but people got hired in above him and now he has a new boss. So he feels like he's lower down the chain. So you have to make those kind of assessments with people and figure out if they have the desire to grow, if they want to grow, if they're capable of growing, and then can you teach them? And can you teach them fast enough?
And I think that's a challenging thing too, kind of segueing something else too. You brought up habits, whether it's lack of growth mindset habit, or hey, this is how we've always done habit, or I've never done this, so I don't see I really need to do this habit. What habits are you seeing kind of and again, I think this is a perfect segue into the buyer behavior discussion that we're having. What habits are you seeing hold people back, and just should it be applicable in today's market?
You know, the biggest one is the ability to say, I don't know, but I want to learn. And if you're that shop manager and you've always done the job shop where you hold the part of the mast there and you build the top section of the mast and you put on the crown and the lights and everything without moving it. And now they want you to move it progressively through the shop. We're going to weld here. We're going to install cabling here. We're going to install lights here, hardware here, kind of a thing. If you can't make that change in your mind, if you don't open your mind to learn, you're probably going to limit what you can do for growth. And it's scary for a lot of people because they've been doing the same thing the same way for a long time.
Do you see when you're in conversations with people, do you see that old school mentality of not wanting to change? Are people holding on to that more, or because there's been so much change in this industry right now that's happening so rapidly, are people okay with accepting a little more change in their routines
I
in their
think
life?
so. I would hesitate to put it by like a demographic age based thing. I think part of it is if you have good managers in the past and you've leaned in and trusted and you've grown with the right environment, it's easy to do that again.
Okay.
If it's been in this case, I'll say old school environment where sink or swim, we're going to give you a job. And if you figure it out and survive, great. If you don't, we'll put you back where you were or fire you. And I've seen both, that you don't have a lot of trust for someone saying we're going to do it a new way. And it feels like the risk is on you, not on them.
Okay.
Whereas a good manager, if they're implementing a new system and it doesn't work, if they blame the people who implemented it, but not the person who came up with the idea and championed it, that's a management problem. So I think is people's experiences inform sometimes their willingness to buy in,
Yeah.
get confidence, and sometimes it's the personality of the leader in doing that. That would be the biggest top line thing I've seen.
So we're talking about kind of how buyer behavior has changed, and obviously we're not talking demographics or anything like that. Before we kind of dive in, because I think the whole buyer behavior changing and kind of your in addition to what you're doing about your approach when it comes to creating a personal brand, adding value, educating people online. Before we start talking about that, because I feel like, and I might be kind of filling in your path for you, but I feel like you started something about 18 months ago. Right? You started something 18, but then you noticed something. You noticed that buyer behaviors are changing, so you have to start getting out online more. So let's back up first. I want to hear about what your experience was. Why did you decide to kind of start doing building something on your own, launching your own company 18 months ago into your career, which is absolutely exciting and terrifying.
Yeah, it's definitely both. That's for sure. I have been in private equity for a long time, and I've been C-level. So I thought I'd find another C-level job in private equity.
Yep.
And the market, I'll describe it as a hiccup. The pandemic caused private equity to put more money into a lot of their companies to keep them alive during the pandemic.
Okay.
And because they invested more money to make their multiple back, if they wanted to make 3 times or 4 times their money, they now had a higher hurdle because they put more money in. And the business was recovering from a lower bottom. So there's been a bit of a hiccup in the private equity market where some of the holds are longer and they're struggling to get to their returns, partly because oil and gas energy has struggled for the last 10 years. So the double combination has been hard. So when I went to look for a private equity job in a portco, they basically said, find us a company to buy and we'll make you the CEO. And now I had to find the deal as well as interview for the job. So, and in private equity, you can joke, but they're private. They just don't write online.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
They have a profile, but they're invisible. They don't post anything.
For a part of the industry that everyone talks about, pretty much almost every conversation, you're exactly right. It is very private.
Yeah. And family offices are even more private. You hardly know they exist if they're there. They just don't like that profile. And I get that if they hung out a sign that said we're buying companies, come talk to us,
Right.
um, they could get inundated and it'd be hard to process. But they also want deal flow at the same time. So that's a choice of the industry to not talk about it. And then, of course, when you're selling a company, you never post about it. You don't hang out a sign because it could affect your business, your
Right.
new business. So I decided was doing my own thing, so I could post about mergers and acquisitions, transactions, buying and selling companies. And I chose to rip headlines from particularly the Wall Street Journal, but the news about what's happening. And I would use a case like is Shell going to buy BP as an example and teach about a deal. And one of my favorite posts about the Shell BP, because I had a bunch of those, was someone in my post kept writing that ADNOC wanted to buy BP. And I was like, is this guy crazy? Like, why would ADNOC's state owned in the Middle East? And BP is the closest thing you're going to get in the West to a state owned oil company. Like, it just didn't make sense that I didn't think the regulators would allow it. So why talk about it? And it came back that one of the guys said, well, ADNOC doesn't want the whole company. They just want the LNG trading part. And then the light went off and I thought, BP is worth more in pieces to different companies. Because in all my posts, people had written, well, Shell wants this, Exxon wants that, Chevron wants this, ADNOC wants that. And so I did a kind of back of the envelope of what those divisions are worth to the different buyers.
Okay.
And the market cap of BP was like 54 billion at the time. And those different companies would pay 74 billion for the company. So if you broke it up, it was worth more in pieces than together.
Interesting. Okay.
So I did a post that taught about how sometimes if you have a 3-division company that does electrical, does fabrication, and does hydraulic systems, one of those may be worth more as 3 companies than as one.
Yeah.
And I was trying to teach a small and medium business owner, manager, that their company may be worth more in parts than together, using BP as an example.
That's a very interesting thing to teach. I like that. Okay.
And so each of my posts generally has I'll call it a micro learning or a lesson to offer somebody a insight into a deal. Why would they do this? What's going on? What was their thought? And what could be doing it? So, and there's so many parts of a deal, so many ways they can go, that there's just an endless number of stories to tell. So
for those that don't follow Tony, I'm going to just echo what you said. Every time that you post something, I love how it's like it's a mini lesson. I mean, you take pretty much, you take a headline. This is happening here, and this is whatever. And I love how you kind of, again, this is why I say, follow Tony and all that stuff. And Tony, how do they get in contact with you, by the way? Where can they find you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Tony Beebe.
Okay.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn. And then, but what he'll do, he'll have that headline, and a lot of times, a lot of people see headlines, and I don't understand. Okay, well, this is a headline. I don't understand kind of the nuances or what's below the surface. You do such a great job in teaching this masterclass level, and this is what this means, and this is why, and here's some lessons to learn. So it does apply to maybe different sections of everyone's life who wants to learn about that. So anyway, so everyone out there that wants to kind of learn something throughout the day, check out his stuff. So anyway, go on.
Yeah. So I enjoy having those discussions, teaching people. And my goal is to share. Well, when I was trying to get a PE firm to buy a company to make me the CEO, with the posts to show thought leadership because I've always been reporting to the CEO for 15 years. And I wanted to demonstrate that I could think and act like a CEO. So I started writing posts like I was a CEO and could think strategically and understood the deals. And I was trying to speak to the PE firms to show that I had that capability. And a lot of people liked what I wrote. They weren't all at PE firms. Actually, most of them weren't, because they're a small portion of the oil and gas space. And so, but what it turns out is that I've become an authority figure because they don't post, and so there aren't many other authority figures. And I've become, I hope, a trusted resource to learn something about a deal. And if you have a question, feel free to reach out, or how does this work? Or how can I maximize the value if I want to sell my company in 3 years? Or I talked to a couple of people. We both just talked to someone this morning that asked me to help him talk through how to raise money. And I gave him some advice on managing the risk for the investors so they feel more comfortable writing him checks to invest in his company. And I can talk through things like that with people.
So you decided, so the PE company was like, go find a company, bring it to us, we'll make you CEO. Private equity companies, you just said they're extremely private online. What was that like for you to say, you know what? Private equity companies are private. I'm trying to get with private equity companies. I'm trying to do this private equity companies. I'm going to start posting publicly. What was that? What was that thought process for you? And were you worried about a repercussion? Because this is why I'm asking this, Tony.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and I want to go, obviously you can take this more as we kind of start talking about this, but there's a lot of people out there, not, everybody. I'm talking about any demographics, like, well, what do I have to offer? I'm very uncertain about posting this. I might like a LinkedIn post or some other post, but I have nothing really to contribute. So I love how you took this on less than 18 months ago, and you're blowing and going with your impressions, your content, your platform, and you just started. You just kind of started recently. So what was your mindset on, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there? So talk to me about kind of that and what you've seen from the benefits of that. Then we can kind of get into how the buyer behavior has changed and why it's necessary to do this.
Well, yeah, sure. It's definitely a white knuckle moment when you go to push, enter and put those posts out at the beginning.
Yeah.
At this point, 500 some later, it's second nature. But at the beginning, it was very scary did I write it? Am I going to look stupid? Did I make a mistake? And I'll tell you, there was 6 months in, I posted about Shell hiring an investment bank to look at buying BP. And then like 2 hours later, Shell in the UK denied doing it. And Shell in New York had said that they did it. And the Wall Street Journal had this exclusive. And I thought I'd really screwed up and written something that wasn't true. And about Shell and BP, no less. So it was somehow a colossal mistake or a massive miscommunication on their part. But it's very scary, and that's like your nightmare of, did I just post the wrong thing about the wrong people?
Yeah.
It took me a while to learn and get the hang of it, to do it right. But I think that you just have to get started, and you can start really small at the beginning, with, and the algorithm makes a big difference in how well you do. So if you write the difference between a 7-word comment and an 8-word comment for the algorithm is significant, because at 8 words, the algorithm picks it up and treats it differently. So so those small things can make a difference. So if you just start writing, thanks for sharing at the post, that's great. You're out there and you start moving. And eventually you can say, I appreciate you sharing. I learned a lot. And then you can come back and say, I wonder what would have happened if they would have done this, or did they think about that? And I get a lot of people that comment on the posts. Some you can tell they're angry, some they're happy. They lost their job in a merger. They want to vent somewhere about how, how the CEO got his big bonus and they didn't get, they lost their job, kind of a thing. And I try and do jujitsu on that and turn it around, and make it as positive as I can for them. And I think that's always hard, because it's like a family for people. So I try and be really delicate. In most posts, I try and be positive. Like today, there was Phillips 66 acquired half of a company, and everything I was reading talked about how the company that was selling sold too low for a price. And that's wonderful. And that's how the news is reported. But I tried to flip it and write about how Phillips 66 bought at a bargain.
Okay.
And it's positive. And I'd rather write a positive post than one about that manager at that company sold too low, because the other guy got a deal, and maybe he's the smarter guy in the deal. I don't know. But if I can make a post positive, I will. So I kind of set some rules for myself when I did posts like that. I want to teach something. I want to make it positive, because wouldn't I rather say that CEO is really brilliant And by inference, the other guy may not have been as brilliant, rather than say that CEO sold too low. And by inference, the other one's smart.
I think what you're saying, I think that is such a great intentional way to engage on social media platforms. Because this, some people are angry. Some people, they just want to get behind the keyboard and kind of chime in, whatever. I remember, Tony, I posted a picture when I first started my company, and it was at the Petroleum Club, and me and like a group of young professionals and all that stuff. And pictures say one thing, but no one understands what goes on underneath, under the surface and stuff. And I posted that, and it was like, it was right after COVID. So, it was kind of a lot of people getting let go. And this person chimed in, an older gentleman, and it was very, very negative, very, like, oh, good to see y'all are successful when people out here are not working. And man, like my reaction, I initially want to be like, well, you don't know what's going on, all that stuff. My wife really kind of did a good job of walking me back and saying, this is a great opportunity to connect with someone, not get defensive, to connect with them. So I actually made a very like post and all that stuff. Then I reached out to him and we talked on the phone and all that stuff. And just turned out this guy, he was bent up because, he was let go of his directional job, couldn't find work. And then I kind of did a review of his online performance. I said, well, honestly, you're talking too much jive to anyone hire you. So what, you have so much experience, talk about your experience. So it was a great thing about being intentional, about not being negative, not being defensive, not proving that you're right. But how do we make this more conversational, collaborative, and honestly uplifting?
Yeah, I trained as a coach, and when I went through the training as a coach, one of the reasons was I hadn't worked with a lot of millennials and Gen Z in the past, because the industry had a demographic bubble just from 84 to the mid to late 90s. They didn't hire much. And so I was asked to describe how that felt in the workplace and publicly. And that was really odd. But I said, the baby boomers started out and work was a punch the clock. And you came in early and took the rig call, and then you stayed late.
Yeah.
But when you left, you back in the day, went to the bar, you went to the gym, you went home, you did something with your kids, you may have played tennis or racquetball, whatever you did. And you were unreachable most of the time. You weren't at work. And now when you go, like, you're reachable all the time, 24/7. And so it feels like the people that grew up in a system where when you were in the office, you were on, and they're now reachable in the evening, but that's just they took that on themselves. I think a burden. But the other people that grew up that way are like, well, I'm going to work in the evening, so I'm going to do personal business during the afternoon, because I'm mixing everything. It's mixed in their head and in their life, and they're just very comfortable with it. And you have to be comfortable with that too, both as their boss, to be respectful of it, and as a coach and as a leader, manager, I needed to understand that better, and I wanted some perspective. And when you explain it that way, like, well, nobody wants to go to the office and turn off their personal life for 8, 9, 10 hours and then go home and live their personal life and take work calls. Like, that feels like it's unfair. And you're like, well, if I'm going to take a work call at 8 p.m., I'm going to take a personal thing at 3 p.m.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's just a quid pro quo in there somewhere that the younger generation seems to have made peace with, that the older generation struggled with some, because it was ingrained over 20, 30 years of and I think that, like, social media and some of those are that way too. When people reach out and do different things, is like, if you notice my posts, there's not a picture of me in any of them. I admire you for the pictures you do with the people and yourself. And I haven't done video of myself yet either. So those are coming as I work on being out there more.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you posted about us, I'll share that I've thought it looked like I was shorter in person, or than I care to admit. And then I have a good friend who's taller than you, who said, well, you weren't that tall. So I just thought, I tried to make humor out of it. And, rather than like, oh, I look short, that was my first thought. But I thought, how do I make this positive?
It's so easy to tear our own personal selves down. So talk to me about kind of like, I think this is a good natural segue to kind of what you're doing, how you're helping people out there. You've identified, you stepped out 18 months ago. You're carving a new path. You're building something on your own right now. and you realized throughout this whole process the necessity of having a personal brand, building your own personal brand, and being engaged, and not just being engaged, offering value. Can you talk to me about how the buyer behavior has changed and why you need to be kind of relevant on social media, and kind of how you help people shine a light on them or shine a spotlight on themselves? So walk me through those three little processes on how buyer behaviors change, how to get confidence whenever you are posting, and kind of how you help people do that. That way people can kind of connect to you after this.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a bit of a nerd and I read and study a lot. And I read one book called Endless Customers, and it talks about social brand and perception in the age of AI. And because there was, I think most people from a search engine optimization, or you want to get high profile on Google.
SEOs, whatever. Yeah.
And now with AI, more people are searching via AI, and so you want to get found that way. So I was trying to study how I would post and be effective at it. And I really figured it out about 4 months ago. And it turns out, as I was reading and learning and trying to master this new found space for me, the social media branding, that I realized that most of the companies I'm working with, like the two I've got deals in process now, largely their digital media is pre-pandemic search engine optimization. And during the pandemic, things changed, and then AI's changed it again. And they're like 2 steps out of phase with where the world's at.
Okay.
I think that they're not reaching their customers optimally. And I realized that what I was doing that worked for me could probably work for them and should help them. And so I've been trying to help teach people how to reach out, how to write better, how to post, and some different strategies on what to do to help grow their business and build revenue and develop that positive presence.
That is the thing I think is important. You just said right there, because I hear a lot of people talk about personal branding. This is how you post, how you do all that stuff. What you actually, being an engineer and being a self-proclaimed bookworm, you're actually saying, hey, listen, this is all important, but you're actually talking about how do we connect this to driving revenue? How do we do your post, your content, your brand to drive revenue? So it's not just get out there to build goodwill and to build online trust. You're actually trying to create some movement with the people you work with.
Yeah, I put a CTA, or a call to action, at the end of all of my posts.
Mm-hmm.
And it is generally pretty soft. LinkedIn doesn't like salesy things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty light, but it basically says if you're working on a deal, or if you're doing, there's a couple of variations I use, but it says if you're working on a deal, if you know something like this, reach out and talk to me. And that's really just a soft call to action. It asks them to take a step and come talk to me about a company that's worth more in parts than it is together, or
Right.
something like that. And that started a lot of discussions, and that's my funnel to find new companies
And this
beyond.
is something that can be replicated for other individuals as well, too, which I think is fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. I'm helping a couple of CEOs message, because it's more effective from the person than the company
Yes.
profile.
That's also how buyer behavior has changed. You're right. It's more personal than it is a company. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like one of the guys in his company. He works in the marine space, and he kept thinking, I have this really narrow niche. I need to write just about my niche, and it's so small. And I was like, no, you don't. The submarine that was at the Titanic that
Yeah.
collapsed.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can write about that and how that engineering that he does wasn't robust enough. You can write about a ferry boat that sank, or the tanker that ran into the bridge in Baltimore, or whatever it is, and turn that into good marine engineering. Doesn't look like this, and talk about the positives, or talk about that biggest cruise ship ever that just set sail, and how the engineering challenges in that sort of a thing, and taught him how to write the hook for the beginning and the call to action at the end, and to take the whatever he wanted to write about and then do a pivot and talk about his style of marine engineering, and reach out to his audience, which is captains, maybe the chief engineer, the marine superintendents, those kind of guys, and reach them directly.
Yeah.
And
So again, it's not a question of staying in your lanes; it's expanding the lanes. Like let's talk about we can still talk about this, but we can also tie in other things to
yeah,
kind of make it the message more robust.
yes. And to be a little bit creative, and I think that feels hard, and you can use AI to help you brainstorm. You
Yeah.
got to do those. How is this related to that? Like for the marine engineer, I basically said, anything in the water is fair game for you. I said, if you want to go down and go tubing down the river, the Guadalupe, and write about putting a cooler in an inner tube and the stability and balance of that, go for it. People will find that happy on a Friday afternoon,
People will nerd out about that. They'll dive into that.
and and they will make a lot of comments, and you'll get publicity for your company, and they'll think these guys are fun. I'd like to work with them.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is you want to show that. And I know him. I know his personality is like that. He just is too stiff and formal. So I was trying to loosen him up that way.
People are so, I mean, they're so reserved to contribute online. They're so reserved to, you know, what's interesting too? I mean, this is one of those things that I face with. It's like, well, who cares what I have to say? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
who cares? Yeah. I think for me, it's the biggest push is telling people just get past that. If you can connect with one person and maybe change how one person views the, the BP acquisition or that, the cooler in the raft or whatever. If
Yep.
you can connect with one person, to me, that's what matters. So get rid of that mindset. You have to like move the masses, go viral, be right, because nobody's right. It's just a discussion. It's an observation. I think that's key. All right, we're coming up on about 40 minutes now. I want to kind of get your to kind of conclude this. People about to start their own chapters in their life, maybe build their own companies and all that stuff. Looking back on a brief 18 months ago, what are some maybe quick lessons learned, or potentially maybe some advice you have out there for people, wherever they're at in their career level about to start, or maybe they're curious about starting? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I think that it's one of the best ways to build wealth. It's also what I've found is you grow a lot when you start a company. And I've always liked the space where I use all the muscles in my brain and I do a little bit of everything. And being a founder, starting a company, you're going to do marketing, you're going to do accounting, you're going to do the product, you're going to do, if it's engineering, if it's a spreadsheet, you get to do all of it.
Everything.
You get to take out the trash, you get to close the deal, you get to celebrate. And it's scary and it's overwhelming, and you need a big war chest to support you while you get started, or a contract. But the people that have done it, I'll call like an integrated adult. They've really arrived, and they know themselves, they know what they can do, and there's a lot of them have that confidence when they've made a successful, economically viable company. There's just a different presence in them.
So do you have to kind of figure that out before you start? I mean, what is there, or you just said that's something you learn as you go? I mean, where do people need to meet on that, I guess?
I think you earn this along the way, and it's done the hard way. So think of it like a Hollywood movie. There's the problem, and you start out, and you're super excited, and then it gets hard, and
Yes.
it gets a little harder and longer than you thought.
Yeah.
And that's when the music gets really good in Hollywood, and then it comes to the challenge, and you get your first contract and your first commission, and away you are, and you're off to the races or something like that as your company goes. And
I find this is me personally. I find even when you do meet certain benchmarks of success, when you have your own company, the fulfillment is not there, because as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, you're still looking at like, okay, well, what's next? What's next down the road I can kind of get on top of to solidify more security, to build a longer runway. So even the concept of productivity, the concepts of success, the concepts of failure, I think those three have to be very loosely formed, but also you should be able to come back to those and redefine it. What does success? What does productivity? Because I find myself, whenever I do have a space in my day, I'll reset to where I was 4 years ago and start doing, BS work that doesn't really get anything done, but it feels good because I'm doing work. So it's redefining productivity. What is success? This event was great, or this deal was great. Am I successful, or what does that look like down the road? So it's one of those things for me. It's like, you don't know. You have to be open to redefining what you traditionally think of success or progress or anything like that.
I think unless if you're a consultant, if you're start a company, you're just consulting yourself. I'm an engineer, so you're consulting as an engineer,
Yeah.
and you bill out hourly. That once you get term work, that's kind of steady. But if you're building a company where there's scale to it, there's a book that sounds like it's a Star Wars book, but it's a really dry Silicon Valley book. T2D3, triple, twice, double, three times.
T2D3. Okay.
And you think of it, if you take your company and you triple the size, and then you triple it again, and then you double it, and then you double it, and then you double it, those are a lot of inflection points. And that's what venture capital expects of a software startup. And you better be on that path or they're not going to be interested in you very long. But as you go through each of those inflection points, all those things you're talking about change. And you've all of a sudden leveled up. Well, I went from 100,000 a year to 300,000 a year. Well, now my next goal is 900,000 a year. And what got you from 100 to 300 won't get you to 900. You're going to have to organize and reinvent almost everything you do to get there. And you're going to have to develop different systems, different processes. And if you're comfortable with that, you'll keep growing. And if you're not, you'll probably stagnate. And maybe for the guy that just lost his job, 300,000 a year sounds wonderful. But if you realize you do a little more, I can get to 900. And that's just that growth, that never stop learning, pushing yourself to go to the next level.
How do you maintain a mindset where you're enjoying the journey? Because I think, as people build companies or lead teams, or not just even, entrepreneurial people, but a lot of people focus on the destination. They focus on the goal, and the idea of getting there is a grind, and it's so easy to get frustrated at that. So how do you maintain enjoyment as you build?
It's a challenge. And one of the areas I work on is celebrating the victories, whether
Okay.
it's a small one.
Okay.
I think I shared with you earlier that I set a goal as I came into the fall semester and my kids started school that I wanted to be on a podcast a month through the fall.
Right.
And this is my fourth one in 4 weeks.
There we go.
I never expected to be anywhere near that kind of a ramp rate, but I'll celebrate that I kind of almost checked my fall goal,
Yeah, I guess you kind of did.
But you have to pause and celebrate that. And it's not a long, like I'm going to spend the whole weekend enjoying it and put back a couple of coolers full of beer on the Guadalupe or something. But I do try and take time to celebrate the achievements for what I've done.
What does that look like for you? What does that mean?
I have my older son just turned 14, and sometimes it's a conversation because he wants to know what I'm doing and he asks me about it. And sometimes I have a conversation, explain it to him, and he's still at the point where he admires dad. So I kind of just celebrate it by watching that enjoyment. Or sometimes I was out with a friend at the beginning of the summer and I didn't realize how my posts were being received. And he kind of said to me after a couple of beers, "Oh, you should sell these and do some ghostwriting." I was like, "Well, you're really nice after a couple rounds. I'll buy the next round." And I didn't realize that he really meant it. And I Googled myself and realized that I'd been doing really well. I didn't look up my statistics until then. And I just had no idea, kind of that wax on, wax off moment.
Yeah.
Oh, I learned something. And so I indirectly celebrated it by a friend's appreciation, like spontaneously. So sometimes it happens in the moment like that. And I also do some journaling where I just try and mark down wins and things.
Brother, man, you and me both. I carry this thing around nonstop, my journal, and for me, celebrating wins is sometimes just saying, "Hey, this is okay. I don't have to get after my next project so fast. I can enjoy the afternoon or the next 2 hours without stressing out about what's down the line."
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I know a lot of successful people that journal, and I know some people that are reticent. They think it's like a diary, like a teenage girl thing or something. But I will tell you that I modeled a lot of my journaling after Ben Franklin because he had a virtue and vice list. He made a list of, I think, 12 things that he thought he should either learn to do better or that he should stop doing because they were bad. So that's why he called that virtues and vice. And he had just been bankrupt in London. He was like 19 or something and sailing back to America. And his friend who was with him said, "Oh, you missed one that was really obvious," and had him add a 13th to the list. And you can Google it, and his list is really interesting things that he talks about improving
Okay.
in his life. And he did it for the rest of his life. Every day he'd sit down and a check if he did well and X if he didn't. And I do that, something like that every day as well, just to focus on getting better at certain things or taking time to reflect. So if that helps people get there, there's someone like that that's done it in a fun way.
I've found if I don't do whether it's a morning routine or whether it's after the day and I sit down, if I don't put my thoughts down or my goals, my daily goals in the morning, and don't get me wrong, I always this is what I teach, this is what I coach, always do this and all this stuff, but I'm human. I don't do it all every day. I notice that if I don't do it for about 2 or 3 days, my day starts controlling me. I
Yeah.
start losing focus. I start losing control. I don't feel as productive. I don't feel like my fingers on the pulse. So if I don't set my, whether it's goals or daily, vice virtues and all that stuff, I notice that the day takes me versus me controlling the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. If I follow my plan and do the things I'm trying to do, I end up being a closer version of my best self.
Yeah. Yeah. And more in control. And for me, it's accepting everything, the things that are out of my control and the things that are in my control. So I definitely think, getting your mind out of your mind on paper definitely helps clarify and prioritize your day. So, question: Who needs to get in touch with you? Why do they get in touch with you? And what are y'all going to talk about to wrap up? So, how do people get in touch with you? I think that's through LinkedIn.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so, what? So, if people want to get in touch with you, a potential about what is that? Is that building online presence to drive revenue?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to people about that. I'm helping people do that. I'm kind of starting that as a complement to buying and selling, helping people sell their business or buy businesses. And I found most of those buying and selling need help on their online presence.
Do
And
you
I'm
see? Do
happy
you
to
see the
help.
online presence as being kind of a necessity in today's world?
I think it is. When I broke out, like you would find salesmen bring donuts, they'd bring stuff at lunch, they'd buy
Yeah.
you a drink at the bar, they'd go put on a barbecue, they built relationships.
Yeah.
And they would sell via relationships and spend the time teaching you about their stuff. And today, with the way it's gone as procurement and the people that are coming up, particularly I'll call it journeymen, but they're professionals, they're really trying to run a proper process with quotes, learning about the process. They want to be educated and they show up to hire any service or buy a product at work like you would show up to buy a car. You don't go to the dealer and say, "I need a new car, help me figure out which model." You go
Right.
in there and you know which model you want, and you generally know the options and the colors and
And you also know every other single car dealership what that price is. So you're I mean the so that being said, the buyer is very informed.
yes. And if you don't have a system to inform the buyer, they're going to skip you and go to the next one.
Yeah.
And that's the big part of the process is you need to teach the buyer about what you do and they need to trust you.
And that's not a
Full
sales
care.
pitch. That's not a presentation, a slide deck. That's just you being the thought leader, the subject matter expert, and communicating that value.
Yes, that's like me saying BP is worth more in part. Someone else could say it's worth 80 million. Somebody else could say 60 million. I've given you a number, 74, but I've gone through systematically a way to show you how to separate it and make more money. Um, and that process is a lesson I've taught. And you may disagree on the numbers, but that's for free, and it's a real thing.
But I think if you start arguing about the numbers right there, you're missing the whole concept of what
Yes.
you're actually trying to do. It's you're missing the force of the trees.
And they understand that I was teaching them, and I've trusted them enough to say, well, if you did this with your company, but like in the case of founders, they usually have a emotional tie to their company and don't
Yes.
want to separate it, and that may be worth more to them than the premium they'd get breaking it up. So having that candid discussion, because some of those things are very like your first post, it's white knuckle. If you've
Yeah.
spent 30 years building a company, selling it is like sending your kid to college or watching them enlist in the service or something.
Yeah, that's got to be exciting yet also scary at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Tony, I appreciate you you coming on. Any last words of wisdom for the listeners out there or anything like that?
No, I think feel free to make that post and go for it.
Exactly. Make that post, add value, and at the end of the day, be positive.
Yeah, and if you want, text me or DM me, and I'll like your post and comment on it.
And I love, so Tony always comes to the discussion. So I love how you do this. You're always asking a thoughtful question at the end of your comments too, which I like because it allows me to think about maybe my message in a different way, or maybe dig a little bit deeper too. So I dig how you do all that stuff. Tony, I want to thank you for your time on this podcast. Hey, you're at 4. When you gotta get, you gotta 2D3 that goal. All right, with your podcast by 2026. But I want to thank everyone out there for Lead with Confidence. Again, connect with Tony online to either talk to him about, whether it's running a business, buying a business, selling a business, private equity, or even building your personal brand to drive revenue. Tony, I appreciate your time. And man, look at that. We were supposed to talk for 20 minutes. We're at 50 minutes now. I love it. So everyone, thank you for tuning in to Lead with Confidence. If you want to connect more with other men in leadership positions, head over to Exec Crew. That's a men's leadership growth and support group. You can find Tony and myself over that group. Again, that's just a community. That's not a job. It's a community of people that would just want to connect. So I want to thank everyone out there for tuning in, and we will see y'all soon.